Former Harry Reid Communications Director John Summers and Independent Women's Forum Director of Policy Hadley Heath Manning. Hadley, we're at levels this president has not enjoyed, particularly buoyed by the economy, for which he gets high marks consistently. How much of an impact do you think a trade war that erupts and gets nastier has on those numbers?
Well, certainly has a potential for that effect, but today's news about China notwithstanding, economic optimism in this country is at a 15-year high, and we've had 32 straight months of positive economic optimism. So Americans, in terms of being consumers and small business owners, have done very well under the Trump administration, and they do give him credit, as you mentioned. However, the messaging from Democrats, particularly on the so-called Trump tax reforms, they're truly tax cuts for the vast majority of Americans. That's something that I think is widely misunderstood. A lot of Americans don't recognize that they did, in fact, get a tax cut due to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And so continuing to make that point to voters is going to be critical for President Trump going into 2020. If that's his signature legislative economic achievement, and of course his deregulatory agenda that's largely been through the executive branch, those are things that have affected the vast majority of American workers and families. And it's something that makes it hard, even for Americans who dislike the president personally, makes it hard for us to hate an incumbent when the economy is doing well.
Well, you know, the facts might be on your side on the tax cut. The perception is not. I mean, when people are asked about it, most of them think they still didn't get a tax cut. So we could go back and forth on that. But John Summers, I do find it interesting on the China trade deal that Chuck Schumer came to the president's defense regarding China to hang tough and maintain that posture. What did you make of that?
Well, and Schumer has always been tough on China and has always had problems with administrations who weren't. You know, he took Obama to task. He's taken Trump to task as well, particularly as it relates to currency manipulation. So I think he's doing the right thing here, and we'll see where the president lands. I don't think tariffs are really going to be where we want to land, because that's what, as I understand it, is really what's going to help lead into another situation where the Chinese further manipulate their currency. And I also think, like a lot of people, view tariffs as taxes that are ultimately paid by Americans who buy these goods.
Right. You know, Kevin, people should keep in mind that the Chinese have had tariffs in effect for quite some time when it came to American goods trying to go their way. So we're responding in kind. Some say too much in kind of the other way. But I'm wondering, it's one thing to absorb 10% tariffs, quite another to absorb 25%. One thing to talk about $50 billion worth of Chinese goods affected, quite another, you know, $500 billion worth of Chinese goods affected. That could be a game changer and hurt the president, could it not?
I think it absolutely could. And if you look at President Trump's base, this trade war with China and implementing more tariffs on them will certainly play well initially. It's the idea of America first. We're putting America's workers first with these tariffs. And it feels like you're sticking it to the enemy, in this case, China. But ultimately, I think President Trump's base are going to be the ones that are often most impacted by these tariffs. They're the ones that are going to have to pay more when they're getting an LG refrigerator. They're the ones that are going to pay more for products with high rates of steel and technology. So it may fit well, this tariff battle and this trade war initially, and the idea of America first. But in the long run, tariffs are a tax on consumers. They're going to make goods higher for people that are in Trump's base. And so I think it is going to end up backfiring in the long run for a lot of people that may not see a dip in the market, but they are going to feel the effect of this trade war when they pick up everyday goods.
You know, Hadley, that hasn't happened to any large degree yet, because a lot of these U.S. businesses that have operations in or extract revenues from China have not passed those increases along. But they'll be hard-pressed not to if the edict is suddenly double what they're dealing with now. That could be a game changer as well, right?
That's right. And I think, you know, when it comes to both the tax cuts that I mentioned and the tariffs that we've been talking about, the game is really perception versus reality. But when reality hits, it's going to be all the more important that, as we saw in the last jobs report, not only are nominal wages increasing, but real wages have been increasing. That means, you know, wages taking inflation into account. If price inflation on particular household goods and consumer goods increases as a result of a trade war or as a result of tariffs, That's certainly not good for American families, not good for our household budgets and our bottom lines. But the question will really be, at whose feet do we lay the blame? And this is more than an economic struggle with China. We have to keep in mind that this is really a power struggle on a world stage where, of course, the Chinese want to appear strong, not just in their own state media with their own people, but it's really about a power struggle and a new world order where we're really debating and many countries are watching who's really in charge of the global economy and of the global power structure. And whose national security are we going to put first?
You know, John, it's uncanny how much the U.S.-China trade talks, affect the markets. The better they look, better the stock market looks. Worse they look, worse the market looks. Let's say we get a deal. Let's say it's a substantive deal. Let's say the Chinese stick to that deal and their built-in measures to make sure they do. Would you, as a Democrat, worry about the political fallout from that? That would be a huge victory. It also would be a huge leap, but we're not there yet. But what do you think?
No, I think Democrats and Republicans alike want what's best for the country. And for me, I'm not concerned about the president getting a political win or not getting a political win.
You are a little bit, right? I mean, I know you're best for the country, but you want the best until maybe the day after Election Day, right?
There are certain issues, I think, that rise above the political fray, and I think this is one of those.
Cabot, young people, you're in touch with them all the time because you're young yourself. But I'm wondering, the back and forth with this, does it register with young people? Or do they say, well, the president's right. The Chinese have been hosing us. We got to do something.
I think it's important to look at who millennials are. There's a big misconception with a lot of Americans that it's just college students. Millennials are now into their adulthood. Millennials are now into their mid-30s, late 20s. So these are people who are getting ready to settle down, build a house. They've grown up in a time of economic uncertainty. This is the first time in most millennials' adult lives where they see an economy that's thriving, that's strong. And so I think those results of a strong economy, of a confident economy, go against the rhetoric that they're hearing about how horrible things are going to go against President Trump. And so I think that there is some confusion right now from a lot of millennials when they see the strong economy and they see the strong rhetoric from the media about how horrible things must be. I do think that's playing a role. It remains to be seen how much of this China struggle will impact millennials on a direct level. Certainly, I think it will start to once they start to buy cars or other larger appliances and they see increased prices as a result of the tariffs. But I do think it's important to remember who we're talking about when we refer to millennials as well.
Bottom line, you're all young. So, I mean, there is that agitating fact. All right, but seriously, thank you guys very, very much.